Lady Gaga was already accustomed to living in a world where almost nothing was ordinary. By 2010, she was no longer simply a rising pop star. She had become one of the most recognizable performers on Earth. Her concerts were enormous productions filled with strange costumes, theatrical imagery, elaborate stages, dancers, blood-red lighting, and an atmosphere that deliberately blurred the boundary between fantasy and reality. But during the Monster Ball tour, according to reports, something followed Gaga that wasn't supposed to be part of the show. It had no body. It had no ticket. It could not be seen by the thousands of people attending her concerts. And yet Gaga reportedly believed that a spirit was following her from one location to another. She called him Ryan. What happened next became one of the strangest celebrity ghost stories of the modern era. The story reportedly began during Gaga's Monster Ball tour. The tour required Gaga and her enormous team to move constantly between cities and countries. Hotels, arenas, backstage areas, dressing rooms, and private transportation became temporary homes. For a performer living this way, exhaustion was unavoidable. Every night brought another performance. Every morning meant another journey. According to reports published at the time, Gaga began experiencing an unsettling presence around her. It wasn't initially described as a violent ghost. There was no dramatic apparition standing at the end of a hotel corridor. There was no bloody handprint appearing on a mirror. Instead, the reported experience was much more disturbing because it was difficult to understand. Gaga apparently felt that something was there. Something she couldn't see. Something she couldn't simply leave behind. And according to reports, that presence eventually acquired a name. Ryan. The name itself sounds strangely ordinary. That may be one reason the story became so memorable. A ghost called Ryan doesn't immediately sound like something from a horror movie. It sounds like a person who might once have lived next door, worked backstage, or stood in a concert audience. But Gaga reportedly became convinced that Ryan was a spirit. And worse, he seemed to be following her. The Monster Ball tour was taking Gaga across the world. At one point, the tour reached Ireland. Gaga had reportedly already felt uncomfortable about the presence before arriving in Belfast. According to an account later published by The Fader, a friend described Gaga as frightened by Ryan's presence, although the spirit was not said to have physically attacked her. The friend characterized the problem as something that had become increasingly disturbing and persistent. Imagine the situation. You're one of the most famous people in the world. You have security around you. You have dancers, musicians, assistants, stylists, and technicians surrounding you. Thousands of fans are waiting outside. Every movement is planned. Every hotel room can be secured. Every entrance can be guarded. Yet none of that matters if the thing frightening you isn't human. A security guard can stop a stranger. A locked door can keep someone outside. A hotel can change your room. But what do you do if you believe the thing following you doesn't need a door? That was reportedly the problem Gaga faced. Gaga was apparently concerned enough about paranormal activity that she took unusual precautions. Reports claimed that she had paranormal investigators examine hotels and venues before she entered them. According to The Fader, she had reportedly spent thousands of dollars on electromagnetic field meters, equipment commonly associated with paranormal investigations, in an attempt to detect unexplained activity. To a skeptic, this could sound like superstition. To someone who genuinely believes that an unseen presence is following them, however, it might seem perfectly reasonable. Think about what happens when fear takes hold. A strange noise becomes significant. A light flickering becomes suspicious. A shadow in a hallway suddenly appears deliberate. An unexplained movement becomes evidence. And when you're constantly traveling, sleeping in unfamiliar rooms, and performing under extreme physical and emotional pressure, the mind can become hyper-alert. Every hotel is different. Every building makes unfamiliar sounds. Pipes knock. Elevators move. Air conditioning systems switch on and off. Doors expand and contract. Electrical equipment produces strange noises. But according to the reports, Gaga didn't believe Ryan was simply the result of ordinary hotel noises. She believed there was something else happening. Eventually, Gaga's concerns reportedly reached a point where she wanted to confront the presence. The setting was Belfast. Instead of simply ignoring what she believed was happening, Gaga reportedly turned to a medium. The idea was extraordinary. A séance would be conducted. The purpose was not merely to discover whether a ghost existed. It was reportedly intended to communicate with the entity that Gaga believed had been following her. Friends gathered around her. The atmosphere must have been surreal. Outside, Belfast continued its ordinary life. Cars moved through the streets. People went to work. Fans waited for the concert. Technicians prepared equipment. Musicians rehearsed. But somewhere inside the private world surrounding one of the biggest pop stars on the planet, a group of people were reportedly preparing to communicate with a spirit. And the spirit had a name: Ryan. According to the published account, Gaga and her friends participated in a séance. The objective was simple: tell Ryan to leave. The reported encounter was not presented as a battle with an evil demon. There was no elaborate exorcism, no priest, no dramatic explosion of supernatural energy. Instead, Gaga reportedly wanted to confront the presence directly. She wanted it gone. The words attributed to her intention were essentially, "Go away." There is something strangely human about that. Imagine believing that an invisible person has been following you from country to country. You don't necessarily want to destroy it. You don't necessarily want to understand its entire history. You simply want it to stop. Leave me alone. Go away. According to the Fader's account, there were no reports of Ryan troubling Gaga after the Belfast séance. And that is where the story becomes particularly intriguing. Because if Gaga really believed the spirit was following her, then Belfast represented the turning point. Before Belfast, Ryan was reportedly something she could not escape. After Belfast, the story apparently went quiet. There are two very different ways to interpret what happened. The first is supernatural. Perhaps Gaga really did experience something she could not explain. Perhaps she felt a presence around her. Perhaps the séance genuinely convinced whatever she believed was there to leave. For people who believe in ghosts, the story fits a familiar pattern. A person senses an unseen presence. The presence becomes increasingly noticeable. Attempts are made to identify it. Eventually, communication occurs. Then the activity stops. The second explanation is much more ordinary. Gaga was living under extraordinary pressure. The Monster Ball tour demanded constant travel, performances, interviews, rehearsals, and appearances. Sleep deprivation alone can produce unusual experiences. Stress can make ordinary sounds feel threatening. Unfamiliar hotel environments can create a persistent sense that someone is nearby. And once the idea of a ghost enters someone's mind, confirmation can become easier to find. A light turns off. A floor creaks. A door moves. A strange feeling appears in an empty room. The brain naturally attempts to connect these events. That doesn't mean Gaga was lying. It simply means that believing something happened and being able to prove what happened are two different things. The story became particularly fascinating because of who was involved. Lady Gaga had built an artistic identity around the strange and supernatural. She wasn't frightened of unusual imagery. Her performances frequently included dark themes, bizarre costumes, and theatrical horror. She could stand on stage covered in fake blood without blinking. She could transform herself into almost anything. That made the idea of Gaga being frightened by something invisible strangely compelling. The woman who appeared fearless in front of tens of thousands of people was reportedly worried about something nobody else could see. And the contrast was irresistible. There was another strange coincidence surrounding Gaga's career. Years later, she would become the star of American Horror Story, Hotel, playing the mysterious Countess, a supernatural character associated with a hotel filled with death and paranormal events. The series premiered in 2015 and deliberately immersed Gaga in an atmosphere of horror and supernatural imagery. In reality, however, her alleged encounter with Ryan had reportedly occurred years earlier. So when audiences later watched Gaga walk through the fictional Hotel Cortez surrounded by ghosts, vampires, and murder, they already knew the bizarre story that had followed her during her own tour. Reality had apparently given Gaga her own ghost story before television gave her one. The most unsettling part of the Ryan story isn't the séance. It isn't the paranormal equipment. It isn't even the claim that a spirit followed Gaga across countries. It is the idea of being unable to escape something you cannot see. Consider the life of a touring performer. You leave one city and travel to another. You sleep in a different hotel. You wake up and enter a different dressing room. You perform. Then you leave again. Normally, changing locations gives you a sense of escape. If you are frightened by something in one place, you can simply leave. But according to the story Gaga was dealing with, leaving did not help. The presence reportedly followed. That changes everything. A haunted house is frightening because you're trapped inside a particular location. A haunting that follows you is frightening because there is no safe location. At least, that's what the story suggests. There is no reliable independent evidence establishing that Ryan was a real ghost. The accounts come primarily from entertainment reporting about Gaga's alleged experience, rather than from scientific investigation demonstrating the existence of a supernatural entity. No photograph has conclusively captured Ryan. No scientific test has established that a ghost was present. No independently verified recording proves that Gaga was communicating with a spirit. That distinction is important. The story can be described as a reported or alleged paranormal encounter, but it should not be presented as scientifically proven fact. Nevertheless, the fact that the story was reported at all makes it an intriguing piece of celebrity folklore. Gaga apparently believed something unusual was happening. She reportedly took the situation seriously enough to investigate it. And eventually, she participated in a séance intended to make the presence disappear. Whether Ryan was a ghost, a psychological phenomenon, a misunderstanding, or simply a story that became larger through media repetition remains impossible to establish. After Belfast, the story reportedly ended almost as strangely as it began. Ryan disappeared. At least, there were no widely reported further incidents involving the spirit. No dramatic final confrontation was reported. No terrifying apparition appeared backstage. No ghostly figure was reportedly seen leaving the building. The invisible visitor simply seemed to stop. For Gaga, that may have been enough. Sometimes people don't need an explanation. They need an ending. If you believe a presence is following you, you may never be able to prove exactly what it was. But if you perform a ritual, confront it, and then the frightening experiences stop, the psychological difference can be enormous. You can sleep again. You can enter a hotel room without wondering who's standing behind you. You can walk through a dark corridor without listening for footsteps. And perhaps most importantly, you can stop looking over your shoulder. Years later, the story of Lady Gaga and Ryan remains one of the stranger celebrity paranormal tales. There is something almost cinematic about it. A global superstar, a world tour, dark hotel rooms, an invisible presence, paranormal investigators, a séance in Belfast, and finally, a ghost that allegedly disappeared after being told to leave. But perhaps the most interesting part is that there is no definitive ending. If Ryan was a ghost, where did he come from? Why did he allegedly attach himself to Gaga? Why did he follow her? Why was he reportedly present around hotels and venues? And why did the activity stop after the séance? There are no verified answers. Maybe Ryan never existed. Maybe Gaga experienced a series of unexplained events that she interpreted as paranormal. Maybe there was an ordinary explanation for every strange occurrence. Or perhaps, as believers would argue, there are experiences that cannot be explained simply because we don't yet understand them. That is the reason stories like this survive. They live in the uncomfortable space between fact and belief. We know that reports about Gaga's alleged encounter with a spirit named Ryan circulated. We know that the story included claims of paranormal investigations and a séance in Belfast. But we do not know what, if anything, was actually standing on the other side of that séance. And perhaps that's what makes the story so unsettling. Because if there really was something in those hotel rooms, something that followed Gaga from one city to another, then somewhere between the roar of the crowds and the silence of the backstage corridors, there may have been an invisible presence watching her. And if there wasn't, then the mystery may be even more interesting. Because the human mind can create terrifying possibilities from things we don't understand. Either way, the story leaves us with the same question. Or did the fear simply disappear? Nobody knows for certain. And that is where the legend of Ryan ends. Not with a scream, not with a ghostly apparition, but with silence. The kind of silence that follows a frightening experience when you finally realize that whatever was there is no longer there. At least, that's how the story has been told.